beyond the distant, seemingly endless contrivances of popular and classical and contemporary of their time musical forms. Lies an unpardonable lie. Unpardonable because as a lie it does not represent the whole truth. But unpardonable as truth has the conception of the contrivance, for instance, of the composers of music who wrote famous pieces who were not famous once. One of those classical composers, or classical examples of composers, I should say, was a composer of the name of Edward Elgar, whose work and extension under Her Majesty Queen Victoria was to some extent shrouded in the losses produced by the Great War, 1418. But by any connotation, the real effects of the pathos that time changes everything. In the words of Mr. Lloyd Webber once, who wrote a love song, Love Changes Everything, explains how sometimes the reasons that lives become the romanticism that represents not whole truth, but a prevarication of it, is explicit in certain pieces of music, but more especially it is explicit in the pathos that, for instance, I wonder if it had anything to do with William Shakespeare's interpretation of those vestiges of the time where so many dead were being buried of plagued and unphilosophized or undiagnosed illnesses, that put perhaps Hamlet in an early grave by 11 and made me president, made me my president's memoirs. Buried before I was born. Beyond doubt, the specific nature of any relationship, as for instance, to take for instance that of Edward II and that relationship with Gaveston by implication, may be entirely and exclusively due to the sermons which Adam of Orton preached in 1326. Or the 14 chronicles that suggested Edward was murdered. 8 especially mention the story of the red-hot horn or poker, though over Bridlington writer claims not to believe it. And of these 8, all were written after 1333. That Edward II died bears such element of truth that it does not explain the fact that how you interpret death can only be explained by the pathos or the humility of never actually experiencing something for which you can be entirely responsible by your explanation. that in any Iron Brand fictionalized version of any demise, or shall we say, and I use this word connotation, as meaning it's a rape narrative at a grisly poetic justice, playing on any unsubstantiated assertions in, for instance, in Edward II place of sodomy. Ah, yes. And the disposition of the unsubstantiated means that the often historical facts that we regard now as truth have in fact become something much propagated of a lie. To the respect that in fact their incursion as, shall we say, prophetic or proverbial is far more important than the historical evidence or any which might, for instance, explain a totally different story. So, looking at the word connotation, what are we to derive from, for instance, the word intention, which is intension, which is in linguistics and logic philosophy and other fields any property or quality connotative of a phrase or another symbol. In the case of a word, the word's definition often implies an intention. This is not to be confused with intention, which is I-N-T-E-N-T-I-O-N, intention, which means planned or unplanned outcome by motive and by the decision to plan such outcome. Whereas intention with the S, intention is a sign as the signifier, a sound image of string of letters of a page recognizes as the form of a sign. That intention of some sort, a word has no meaning. The where Iranians, for instance, we see it rantons or brillig have no intention and hence meaning such may be suggestive. Whereas, for instance, the word ISIS has an explanation twice in the English language, which is not necessarily defined to that first, probably recognized by Prime Minister Cameron in his explanation for defeating some kind of threat from the east, which evokes any war or any Far East war, or explains by any connotation what really truly was in one time the implication of the so-called Byzantine Empire of the Turkish people. But which examples have read from Huckleberry Finn knows that Mark Twain wrote it, and it is possible that, for instance, Aristotle did not tutor Alexander the Great. To see that these intentional, with an S, make the following substitution, Mark Twain, the author of Compelled Opinions, Aristotle, lead me to think also of the connotation that is in fact in read, not read. In read, R-E-I-D, in that of, shall we say, the reed which had the implications fellow of the Royal Society FRS, an award of fellowship granted by the Royal Society of London to individuals of the society judged to have a substantial contribution to the improvement of natural knowledge. This is including mathematics, engineering, science and medical science, as opposed to sales. But as for a good read, as for the connotation that is implied in the reed which, as composer, was the connotation by the name reed, a Clement reed. In fact, that which produces still the electoral position of Composer of the Year by the Music Teachers Association, and that in association with the Lutheran University of the United States of America, also places by connotation the explicit reasons why history must ultimately lie, not where it ultimately may lay. And those explicit reasons where history might lie, in the case of 1329, by feminine cruelty, as explained what is cruel, of Isabella's unspeakable unfeminine cruelty in the context of opposition to her governance of 1329. It gives an account of both explanation and balance of Edward's deposition. There's a connotation, isn't there? Disposition or deposition. The two have a totally different meaning, in the fact that disposition means essentially that position in which you are placed, whereas deposition means the putting down of any position. But in the case of Edward, the deposition of his self-being, preserving the royal dignity to some extent by affirming the office of king, could be attacked only by extreme inhumane violence, but also the vulnerability of whose unmasculine practices. That as even the story of anti-Isabella, it still confirms Edward's unfitness to rule. But the point is, the reasons or the justifications for any interpretation are not necessarily to be held de facto, anything other than de facto, as real evidence. For in fact, if de facto had any meaning in law, is not legal, is not lament of any song, or as indeed guilt has no pathos towards the connotation of the affirmity, shall we say, of sadness. For instance, you can be Edward Elgar, who has composed the Enigma variations under Her Majesty Queen Victoria of England. Or you could be, for instance, that connotation in the name that was Reed. And take, for instance, that fellow of the Royal Society, Reed, who in 1913 published his book on those incursions of English shore, where his interpretations or studies of submerged forests were meaning that, in fact, that kind of historical evidence was either some degree totally projectable by historical facts, and that which were in fact derived from any sense of the pathos of the living life. take it as it was, Clement Reid, the scientist who was born in 1853, coincidentally was the year of the start of the British Brass Band Championships, Royal Albert Hall they are now. In 1853, years which in fact founded such great brass bands, for instance, years around which the Corey Band of Wales, and those of the amalgamations and things of temperance. Reid was born in London in 1853, his great uncle, and we are talking about now the position of Fernando Ray, or the story of why they buried me before I was my prime. We explain and speak to her as to why, for instance, her meeting with her grandfather was postponed more than 12 years. Or was it, in a sense, in anything to do with the fact that she might decline to appreciate the real day that she was born? Or was she born into some extremity that she had no knowledge? She had no knowledge. Born in 1853, Reid's great-uncle was Michael Faraday. His family circumstances meant he was largely self-taught, but nonetheless able to join the geographical. Geological Society of Great Britain in 1874 started drawing up maps. That you could think by connotation that 13 and the shore, 1913, shores and the sands beneath the sands, that whose father, and my father once wrote, numbers as the sands upon the seashore, in a tune in which he composed famous marches for, I believe it was the Salvation Army. He wrote in the Second World War, some 40 years later, the three marches, which one mainly is out of print, which is probably Salvation Banner, and the other two, which are Scarborough Citadel and A Name Which Defeats Me. Are in fact still performed by the Salvation Army at Scarborough. In 1899, Reid elected as a Fellow of the Royal Society, application citation reading geologist in the Geological Survey of England and Wales, served on the staff since 1874 that was written about the man. But in 1913, some 60 years of his life, published Submerged Forest, in which he postulated drowned land between eastern England and the European mainland. His conceptual map of what is now called Doggerland turned out to be remarkably close to the current known reality. having died at Milford-on-Sea in Hampshire in 1916. He had married at St. Asaph in 1897 Eleanor Mary Wynne Edwards. She became a fellow herself and won the Lyell Medal. And may spell Lyell, Lyell, Lyell Medal for her work after he died. But connotations, this is remarkably like, isn't it, the theme which pervades this interview with Fernando. Fernando Ray, to suggest that now was done as much as the conciliation for past error of failure to make such performer no more great than the colour of a set of balls that now produces £70,000 at the end of the Welsh Open Snooker Championship can only be explained by, for instance, more pathos as a lament for the true destiny of colour, and indeed, in fact, the true life of Hamlet, whose life was abruptly ended for William Shakespeare at the age of 11, whose son sadly passed. And if you study Shakespeare, in fact, you see so many seductions given of those roles of then so proverbially important as the grave digger. But the connotations which I speak is that which is mirrored in its slighter integrity of a musical piece written by the famous composer of brass band, Edward Gaveston, who had composed a piece with an intention to deride a truth from those misdemeanors which suggest whole lives as being truths. That much as many have disillusions with their own people, from the case of Edward Prince of Wales in that deposition, shall we say, in that decision to stand down 1936, Edward VI, Edward VII. Edward VII, how many can you have? Edward VIII. Edward VIII, the Duke of Windsor, that you could regard Edward VII as some kind of Edward II because it sounds the same, but places so many centuries apart, that by any representing, whether as Mortimer or whether as Mrs. Simpson, whose guilty party and role in conflict reconfigures as any assertion the role of the words which in language the chiefest sorrow of my state springs from Isabella the fair, she that I loved but now must hate, I held her true, now faithless she. Sleep in deceit my deadly foe brings now, but black despair to me and now my joy she turns to woe. This adversity indeed has provided some surprising capacities, but it is debatable, to put it mildly. And is this not what the true definition of history is? Not a deposition of life, not a concerted erosion of mistruth into affordably acceptable facts. But is history more the fact that when anyone says to anyone's Lord, Master and Governor of my soul, that you realize that there may be a difference between walking on water and walking in the path of wise men? Which have less synonymous connotation to the wetness derived at your local and steep shores that produced submerged forests of 1913, and that of the work of Clement Reid. I bid you and welcome you to meet this Fernando Ray. And in this, the dissolution and why the story of Ray is such historical contempt, in a sense, for one intention of the fact that there is no integrity in the past. That was once explained to me when I was told by a music publisher, he is a man of the past, and they were referring to the man who was responsible as intelligence officer for much of the formation of the great names in the RAF. The Royal Air Force, such names as Peter Sellers, Dick Emery, Cardew Robinson, all many, and those associates with Kenneth Connor, whom I met in approximately 1979, and was expected at the King's Theatre, Margate, to be able to repair the blinking indicators on this proverbially uncharacteristically British reliable Jaguar. Fernando Ray.